On the table on the way in are actually all on our website. So we had a few different articles that are just great reads and the Greenwich High School Planning Guide. And again, you can get all of that from our website, but if you prefer me to email you a copy, I'm happy to do that as well. Okay, well first I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. We're delighted to be here today with you. And I'd like to share some information with all of you about what every parent should know about the college process. Our goal is to try to minimize the anxiety that probably is in the room right now today, so hopefully we're successful in doing that. My name is Allison Lockridge. I'm the College and Career Counselor. If you haven't had a chance to visit the College and Career Center, I would encourage you to do so. It's in the back of the Media Center. On your way out, feel free to pop in. We have a lot of great books that you can take out overnight. You can see where my office is and just kind of get a sense of what the College and Career Center is. I started as a counselor at Greenwich High School about 15 years ago. I was a house-based counselor in Folsom House, actually. And prior to Greenwich High School, I was a counselor in California and also in New York. And I can honestly say, I think my colleagues would say the same thing, that this has definitely been the most rewarding time in my career. We have an incredibly talented group of counselors. There's 17 counselors in our department, which is just wonderful being part of such a big department. One may have an area of expertise that another might not, and we get together every week. We share information with each other. We discuss different topics. We might have, maybe we're struggling with a college list for a specific student. We'll get together with a few of our colleagues. What do you think? So we're very, very collaborative, and it's a very experienced department, so I'm proud to be a member of it. And in addition, we have a wonderful coordinator of guidance. Many of you know Judy Nadell. Unfortunately, due to a family issue, she was not able to be here with us this morning. But she sends her warm wishes, and she's certainly a very big part of our department. I'd like to start by thanking all of you. The PTA is incredibly wonderful to our department, always has been. It is really because of the PTA that we are able to attend the National College Conference every year, which can be an expensive endeavor. This past year was in Utah, which I'm sure counselors here went to. And it's really because of our PTA that we're able to attend the National Conference every year. And in addition, we attend college conferences regularly. We're always going out to visit college campuses. And a lot of that is really because of the support in this room. So we really want to thank all of you before we even get to our topic today. And then in addition, many of you probably attended our college night or big college fair that we had in October this year. It's an annual event. We have close to 250 colleges that come every year. And one of the things Greenwich High School is known for with regards to its college night is many of our parents offer to host admission reps at their house before the event, and colleges love it. We're known for that across the country. And it's just a great opportunity. Admissions counselors are on the road all the time, eating in the car, and every time, I've been as far as, a conference in California, and admissions reps will bring up, your college night, that's where the parents offer to have us at their house and kind of wine and dine us. So it's definitely, all thanks to everybody here today. So just to introduce our panel, we have Shannon Presta, who is a counselor in Clark House, and Shannon's going to be talking about the role of the college essay and the importance of getting involved in your school and community. We have Danielle Nash, who is a counselor in Bella House, and Danielle is going to talk about shaping your college list. And Christina Bios, who is a counselor in Clark House as well, and Christina is going to give us a sense of an overall timeline and the role of standardized testing in the process. We have a lot of information to cover today. This is just the beginning. A lot of this information is repeated over and over again, and we're hopefully going to get time to answer a lot of questions as well at the end. But just to kind of help us with our presentations, just curious about the grade level of people in the room. How many senior parents are in here? Kind of everybody's past that the college process. How about junior parents? Okay, a lot of juniors. What about sophomores? Okay. Freshmen? Excellent. So we have a nice range. We have our experience in the Well, everybody in this room knows that there's a huge amount of peer pressure on students to kind of select and attend a well-known college. We hope that we can confront this issue starting here in this room today as parents and counselors. So important that we work together to minimize the anxiety that unfortunately is so often associated with the college process. Status pressure is real. Kids experience it every day. And as long as we have kids out there that think that there are only 20 to 30 colleges, great colleges in the country, we're going to continue to have stressed out kids that have the same colleges on their list. And many of them are feeling ashamed when they don't get into the schools that they think they would get into. It's important to recognize that some stress is positive, but it's all about finding balance. It's important to encourage our kids to stretch themselves in their academics, stretch themselves in their involvements in their school and community, but with balance. And that's something that we struggle with as counselors on a regular basis. There's so many amazing opportunities in this community, but we work really hard to try to make sure students aren't spread thin. So balance is kind of a key word in our department that we use a lot. Our counselors work really hard to encourage students to be aware of these pressures. We want them to think for themselves and really feel like they have choices. Danielle's going to talk a lot about the college list. We want kids to have choices. We want kids to get accepted to several schools where they're going to be able to make choices with their list. And we want them to take control over this process as much as possible. It does happen where the process takes control over students and parents. And as long as you kind of educate yourselves and learn about this process, we really, as a department, try to work with parents and students really to try to take control over the process. Just a few interesting statistics that Judy asked me to share. One of my favorite statistics, which I'll start off with, is for the past few years, the guidance department surveys seniors before they leave, before they graduate, and 89% of them either strongly agreed or agreed that their counselor was effective in helping them with the college research and application process. Your children are in good hands. Post-high school planning begins as soon as students register for courses at Greenwich High School. There are really well-developed structures and processes in place in our department that really help support the high school planning process, post-high school planning process starting in freshman year. Another interesting statistic, our graduates are a great fit for a variety of colleges. Over the past 5 years, 20 to 25% of our graduates attend colleges that are considered most competitive. Over the past 5 years, graduating class statistics are very consistent. 10% of our graduates attend two-year colleges, and 80% of our graduates attend four-year colleges. And another interesting statistic, senior exit survey data again, shows that for the past 2 years, 61% of seniors would be attending their first choice college, and another 19% would be attending their second choice college. So kind of just some interesting statistics. So before I pass it along, I just want to give you a little overview about what I do in the College and Career Center and how I can support families through this process. In addition to coordinating college nights, which I mentioned, we also host college admission representatives in the College and Career Center every fall. This year we had, I think, close to 230 admission counselors that came to visit Greenwich High School, which was wonderful. And it's really an opportunity for students to learn about different colleges. It's like an info session. It's when you would visit a college campus and you listen to a little info session. That's what happens here. So you sit, you listen, you learn, you ask questions. The visits are open to juniors and seniors. They're typically geared towards seniors, but we do encourage juniors to attend as well. And there might be a couple seats back there. And the visits are held right in the College and Career Center. Some schools attract a much larger group of students than we have in one of the rooms as this. But we really do encourage juniors and seniors to attend as many of those visits as they can, preferably if they have opens. Seniors can miss a class if they ask their teacher in advance. But most of the visits really happen between September and November. So we're really winding down now. We have, I think, maybe 10 college visits left for this fall. But what's really important, which we tell our students, is the admissions counselor that comes for these visits is the admissions reader for Greenwich High School, the person that's going to be reading the student's application. So this is a great opportunity to show interest, but also without stressing out too much about that. It's okay to still sit and listen and ask a question, and that in itself is still kind of showing interest. But those are just a great thing to take advantage of for juniors and seniors. If you are a junior in here, and my one senior parent here, you probably get my emails, hopefully you read them. Each week I send out on either Friday or Monday. We put together a college and career update every week. Looks like this. And all the college rep visits are on the front. You see it's very short now, we have a few visits left. But any scholarship information that we get through the high school, we put all scholarships in this college and career update. Any important events that are going on locally or at the high school. So it's really important to try to read this college and career update. If you're curious to see what it looks like and you're a freshman or sophomore parent, we also post them on the website every week as well. I also published this college book, which many of you might have seen. If you haven't, these are available. We don't have too many copies, but there are a few copies available at the front desk of the Media Center, and you can take them out for 24 hours. But these, it's the statistics from graduates from last year, GPA and test scores only, no student names. So it's basically the same information that's on Naviance, but it's kind of nice visual. The statistics on Naviance are over 4 years, whereas this is just going to give you last year's statistics. So we can kind of just, I usually use it as reference, but actually what I like it for the most is to kind of see how many students are applying to certain schools. Like I just happened to open up to Iona College, which is almost this whole page. So a lot of our students apply to Iona. And then you can kind of see where you fall with your GPA and test scores in this applicant pool. So this could be a really helpful source. Let's see. So I also coordinate or run a number of different workshops in the fall of senior year. I run a lot of workshops on personalizing the application process, interview skills, essay writing. Spring of junior year, I run a number of workshops for the college essay especially, developing your college list. So I send all of that out via email. So you can really encourage your junior kids to come to some of those workshops in the spring. That can be really helpful. I'm also available for individual student appointments. I do meet with a lot of seniors for essay review, application review, mock interviews, resume writing, and kind of anything associated with the college process. So you really want to see me as added support. Students are seeing their house-based counselor for all of these things as well, but maybe a student needs a little more help with, just really spending time on their resume or a mock interview, or, there are a lot of essays, which we'll get to in a little bit, that are associated with the application process. So, sometimes counselors aren't available to meet with students for all their essays. Some students are writing 15 to 20 essays, believe it or not. I also am available for individual assistance for financial aid and scholarships. Senior internship program is also a big part of my position. Seniors leave last 4 to 5 weeks of the school year. Most seniors go on a senior internship. They do have the option to do project as well, but I do coordinate a senior internship program in addition to working with students through the college admissions process. So with that said, I will go ahead and turn it over to Danielle.
All right, well, it's really great to be here today. One of the articles that Allison, or really it's a blog post, but I think that Allison left on the entry table, talks about, no, you didn't?
Yeah, I did, but there were no copies.
So we'll make sure to have that up on our website as well. But for those of you that got that, I loved reading this because it really helps to reframe the question. A lot of our seniors, at Thanksgiving or over the holiday break are going to be asked, so where are you applying? Where are you hoping to go to school? But this write-up challenges students and families to reframe the question to why am I going to college? And I think if we really focus on that question, it really speaks to the whole list development. As Allison said, there's 20, 30, I might even go as far as 60 schools. That it's very hard to get our kids to think of schools beyond that group. And very often, kids come into my office and say, none of the other criteria that we're going to talk about matter. Here's the schools I'm thinking about. But when we really get to the heart of why the kids are going to school, what's going to be a good fit for them, it's really, why am I going to school? What am I hoping to get out of this educational experience? What are my strengths? What are my needs as a student? And if we're able to answer those questions, then it will help shape the whole conversation. We have lots of different resources. I put a few copies. This is a much larger group than I had thought. This again is on our website. It's a list of hidden gems. There are lots of schools that our students often don't think about. And so it's really trying to introduce schools that kids haven't thought about into the conversation. Another resource that we really like is a book called The College Finder. You guys are welcome to come and take a look at that at the end. The author of that book says, the primary goal of the College Finder is to expand the pool of schools that students consider, extend the possibilities they envision, and magnify their sense of power as they're researching schools. And I really liked that. Many of you in the audience know that I also have a son who's a junior. So that adds a whole new perspective to my job. Until this year, I have often said to my friends, Ben is very much the son of a guidance counselor. He's very open-minded, and then the junior year hit, and all bets are off. All the things he's learned seem to have gone out the window. The Student Center really, as the kids start the college admissions process in earnest, puts a whole lot of pressure on the kids. And so we really do recognize that and are trying to work with students and help minimize that stress. In terms of actually putting together the list, there's the obvious things, right? A big school or a small school. And kids will often come in again to my office and say, it doesn't matter if it's big or small. There are very few students that I work with who would be equally suited at a big school and at a small school. So I'm often encouraging families to get out to visit campuses because the kids need to see, they need to feel what are the differences between a big school and a small school. And I try to talk to them about their social networks, right? I mean, they've probably got a group, maybe of 5 friends, maybe of 30 friends, and that's really the strength of their social network. And that's not really going to change whether they go to a school of 1,500 students or 50,000 students. They're probably still going to have a network of 5 to 30 students that they're socializing with. So, but what other things are they looking for? Are they looking for classroom discussions? Are they looking for that big time sports experience? There's lots of things that impact a student's decision on whether a big school or a small school is what's going to be right for them. Again, rural or urban. I cannot tell you how many kids say it doesn't matter, but the experience is going to be very different in rural Vermont than it's going to be in New York City or Washington, D.C. So again, trying to encourage the kids to think about what do they want their experience to be like, what kinds of things do they enjoy doing. I went to a school that was near the ocean, and that was very much a part of my college experience and how we spent our free time. And so I'm always trying to have those kinds of conversations with kids and helping them understand that, like, the community around their campus, how that's going to shape their experience. Again, a lot of kids say distance from home doesn't matter. I had a student recently say she just needed to get as far away from home as possible. She needed something different. But the fact of the matter was, she really just wants to get away from her family. But she could be an hour away and be away from her family. She does not need to flee the country, as she literally told me she would like to do. So again, just trying to help, like, really dig in and refine the reasons that they're looking at schools. Certainly for some students, the academic program is going to be a reason to look at schools. When you have students that are very specific, if they're looking for architecture, pharmacy, a handful of other programs, that may in fact drive the search. For some majors, there are a very limited number of schools that might offer that, but for the vast majority of schools, there's going to be any number of places that the academic programs might meet their needs. The statistics vary from 65 to 80% of college freshmen change their major at least once from what they put down on their application. So I don't necessarily put a whole lot of stock in what the kids say they want to major in, again, unless they tend to be focused on one of those very specific programs. So that's sort of how I work on developing lists with my students. For those of you that have freshmen and sophomores, I would say it's really never too early to start visiting campuses. I encourage families when you're on a vacation, even if it's not about college touring, to see what schools are in the area. Even if it's not an official tour, you're not sitting at the information session, drive through the campus, get out of the car, walk around, walk into the student union or the school cafeteria. Talk to your kids, look up, everybody's carrying around their handheld computer. How many students are at this school? Get the kids a sense of what different schools look like. Drive around the campus community so they have a sense of what does the community around this school look like. Because those really will help inform the conversation when it comes time to really putting the list together. You can say, hey, remember when we drove around that school down in Florida when we were on vacation or while we were out in California. I would also say that I have found more and more 10th graders are going on what I'll call quote-unquote real visits. And I think this has really changed in the last handful of years. And again, as a mom, have seen many of my son's friends going and spending February and April vacation touring schools. And I think as our students are under ever-increasing pressure, they're involved in more and more activities, scheduling those time for the visits does become tricky. And so I do think there's some value in getting sophomores onto college campuses as it works for your family, depending developmentally where your children are with their thoughts and plans. But getting out early might be very beneficial. When we start to think about search, I often think the search list should be anywhere from 20 to 35 schools. And I don't mean that you need to get out and visit 20 or 30 schools, but I call it the home-based research. They should be doing legitimate research. My son has a favorite picture he loves to pull up of academic quality and party quality. And at least it helps shape some conversation. It's brought some schools into discussion that might not otherwise be there. And then I challenge him to look beyond that picture and dig into the research, to go onto the school's websites, to go onto Naviance, to be looking at the graphs for how does his academic profile match with other students from Greenwich High School who have gone on to those schools. Obviously, you'll, as our senior parent and many of the junior parents can attest to, the volume of mail coming into your house will become fast and furious. So looking through those brochures to find some of the facts that might be interesting to the kids. So these are all things to be considering. When it comes time to actually putting the list together, students' lists will range from as few as maybe 7 schools to as many as 12 schools in terms of what we recommend. I tell my students that once that number of applications starts to have a teen in it, it is too many schools to be on an actual application list. Obviously, some of you are here as 9th grade parents. The process for looking for schools starts earlier and earlier. Even if you don't start until January of your junior year when we do our college kickoff, you're spending almost a year looking at schools, considering schools. If in that long period of time we cannot narrow it down to 12 schools, how in the world are the students going to select a school to go to when April 1st rolls around and they all of a sudden have 13, 15, 20 acceptances in hand and we need them to make a decision in under a month? So from that perspective, I really challenge my students to keep their list to 12. And we have a lot of conversations about that. And I think by and large, they do a good job with that. Some students, they will go very heavy on the reach list. And I have had countless parents tell me, My child knows these are all reaches. They're prepared to get those decisions. And then April rolls around. And when 5, 6, 10 denials come in and tell your child, you're not good enough, I'm sorry, you were denied, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. Instead of being able to celebrate April when it should be an exciting time, even if those kids still have 5 acceptances in hand, when the number of denials outweighs the number of acceptances, those kids are left feeling defeated. And I am talking students who have A averages, who play varsity sports, who are presidents of clubs. These kids should not be feeling defeated in April of their senior year. They should be excited. And so it really is, it's so important to manage the list. 2 or 3 reach schools on the list is perfect. It tells the student there are some schools that you might really want to go to. They might be a little bit out of range, but go ahead, reach for it. I don't want any student to feel like they weren't able to strive and try for something. But again, we want the picture to be balanced out with more acceptances. To me, an ideal list has at least 3, if not 5, target schools on it. And those are schools that we think they're in the range for. They may not get in, but we feel like there's a good chance. And then every student should have at least 2 likelies on their list, places that we really think that they are going to get in when we look at those statistics. And I'm not looking for students to just pick from the graph. Oh, I can get in here. I don't need to visit. I don't plan to go there. Because every year I will have at least 1 student who is left with only acceptances to their likelies. And if those students have done the work, they've chosen schools that are a good fit for them, they don't feel as disappointed that they only got into 2 schools. They are still left with the power to decide. I've gotten into 2 schools that I liked, and I get to decide between them, which is very different from the student who threw those schools on and now feels like, well, I never planned to go to those schools, so now what the heck? For some families, merit scholarships are also a really important part of the process. And it's your likely schools that are more likely to give you merit aid. The likely schools are the ones that recognize this student is talented in comparison to the other students that often come to my school. And as such, we want to encourage them to come to my school. And we're going to give you this amount of money in merit aid, which may exceed a family's need for money. And for lots of families, that is very encouraging. And for many students, it does sway a decision on where the students might go. We've also been having more and more conversations about honors programs, which again are a wonderful opportunity for the kids to feel like they are something special. I went to a talk a couple of years ago now by a woman named Julie Lycott-Hames. I don't know if she spoke at Orange Country Day. I don't know if anyone else was there. She was the former dean of freshmen at Stanford. She has a great book out called How to Raise an Adult. And one of the things that she spoke about was in a lot of research that she's done and read, the kids are actually better served going to a school lower than the top school that they could get into. And the reason for that is if you're the typical student attending any number of schools, you look just like that, a typical student. If you are a superstar at a school, the faculty are going to pour themselves into those students. They're going to give them special opportunities, special internships, research projects, even just special conversations and opportunities to come to dinner at faculty homes. And that those opportunities, when the faculty are pouring themselves into kids, really can shape and define future opportunities for those students. So again, really encouraging things to the students and families to think about the process a little bit differently and how those kinds of opportunities might shape the outcomes. I think we're so focused on getting to college that we forget that there's supposed to be a life that comes after it. I want to talk briefly about application strategy. I know that that's a question that often comes up. For those of you that may have been through the process with other children, one application strategy or type of application, as we'll say, is early decision. And the early decision is a binding agreement that the students make when they submit their application. They are saying to that college, if you accept me, I will come. And the student has to sign and understand that commitment. The parent has to sign a statement that they understand that commitment. And their counselor has to sign that we've had conversations with the family and they are clear on that commitment. For some students, early decision is a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate their interest, which is something that more and more colleges are looking at. It's an opportunity for them to say to their first choice school, you are my first choice. I really want to come there and I promise I'll come if you accept me. But for many students, for a variety of reasons, that might not be the right fit. Some schools do not promise to guarantee to meet need. So if financial aid is something that your family wants to or needs to consider, that might not make the most sense for your family. At its purest, early decision was designed for kids who had a clear first choice. As more and more of a gamesmanship attitude has come into the college admissions process, many people are using early decision as a strategy. I want to get into the best school possible. It might not be my first choice school, but what am I going to do to leverage myself into that school? That's not necessarily something, as someone who spent their career in this profession, helping students, it's not necessarily my strategy, but I am certainly happy to talk with students and families about that strategy, what makes sense, what are their chances. When you're looking at those graphs in Naviance, it will become clear that there are schools where an early decision will tip a student into an applicant pool. My son and husband were off doing some college visits just on Tuesday, and the school they went to told them that they have about 2,000 applications in their early decision pool. They take about 40% of their freshman class from early decision, and then 19,000 applications for their regular decision pool. So think about the differences in that. Many of these schools will argue that it's the quality, and I am not convinced about that. It's the same quality. It doesn't matter whether you apply early decision or regular. When I look at the statistics, I am not sure that I agree with that. So there definitely is kind of a leg up for kids who are interested and willing to make that commitment, but it's not the right thing for everybody. Early action is something that is very popular around here. I would say better than 2/3 of my seniors have already applied to some school either under early decision or early action. Early action really just means you're taking action early. You're getting that application in depending on the school. It could be as early as October 15th and maybe as late as November 15th for the early actions. And those schools under the early action application will generally get decisions back to the students before Christmas or maybe just after Christmas, depending on the school. And then there's regular decision and sometimes rolling, which is just the regular applications. For students who didn't get into an early action or an early decision school, for kids who just aren't ready, that other third of my seniors, they just weren't ready for any variety of reasons. They were focused on school, they didn't start visiting schools, they didn't start researching schools as early as some of their classmates, and that's totally fine. Those kids will still have a place to go when they put in their regular decision applications. And those applications may be due, regular decisions may be due January 1st. Some of those kids may even have the opportunity to apply as late as April 1st with regular and rolling decision deadlines. I touched briefly on merit scholarships earlier. Again, more and more families are considering how the financing of an education is impacting where their kids will go to college. And I really encourage families to have those conversations with your students to help them understand when there are financial limitations. There's nothing as heartbreaking as a kid who finds out in April that their dreams have been crushed because their parents never told them that there were financial limitations on where they could go to school. I have had kids come and ask me, Mrs. Nash, can you help me figure out where to borrow $30,000? Borrowing $30,000 to go to school for 1 year is never a good plan. So for those families for whom that is an important part, please just be upfront with your students about those limitations. The biggest source of funding is always going to come directly through the school's financial aid office. The free application for federal student aid is the form that all schools are required by law to use. Many schools also use something called the CSS profile to take a deeper, closer look at your finances. And so using those two tools, the schools will determine what they see your need as, or what the federal government sees your need as. And then hopefully they'll come up with a package that fills the gap between what your need is and the cost of attendance. Unfortunately, many schools still leave students with a gap. That's what we call the difference between those two numbers. And for some families, they're able to figure out how to fill that gap, and other students may have to walk away from an acceptance because that gap is too wide. Looking at a financial aid package, there are many parts to that financial aid package. Grants or scholarships are gift money that the school is giving the students, or that the federal government is giving students, and then student loans are often a part of that package. There are also many private scholarships out there. We do encourage students to register on a handful of scholarship websites. They are search engines that will push out to the kids a variety of private opportunities to apply for different scholarships and grants. And then here at Greenwich High School, we offer the Greenwich Scholarship Association, which is really a wonderful gift to our students, bringing all of the community resources and scholarships under one umbrella. I'm going to leave with, I think that covers everything I was going to talk about. Another wonderful book for those of you that haven't read it is titled Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be by Frank Bruni. He has done college counseling for any number of years and writes for the New York Times, obviously has a book. He's got a great quote in here. He talks about many top people in their field. It's really not about where the kids have gone to school. And he says, referring to a handful of people he names, their careers weren't built on the names of their colleges. Their careers were built on carefully honed skills, ferocious work ethics, and good attitudes. And that is something I really try to remind my students about, and I would encourage you to talk to your kids about as well. Thanks so much. Now on to Christina.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to be talking about the timeline for testing and what we do as a guidance staff to support students. So much of this is actually in the planning guide, so if you received a copy, you might be able to follow along. But in addition to that, it's also available on our website. So if you did not receive a copy, that's just another tool. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, but first and foremost, when you have a ninth grader and they're coming into that high school, the first thing that we are working on as a guidance staff is making sure that they transition well from middle school to high school. School counselors meet in small groups through seminar skills with their students, so we can make sure that they're okay. There's also the house-based learning centers, and a lot of times if there are any concerns, the house-based learning center aides also get in touch with us, the house staff, as well as the team structure that we have for our English and social studies classes. In addition to that, we work on goal setting with your students, ensuring that they're coming up with SMART goals, specific, measurable, realistic, and time-bound. So attainable and time-bound. So those are all things that we take a look at. We're also ensuring that your students are becoming active members of the GHS community. We have during the orientation for ninth graders, we do have a club fair. There are different books. There's the opportunity blocks now, so even if your student isn't able to stay after school, we have the opportunity blocks that they can get involved in different clubs or organizations that we offer at the high school. During ninth grade in October or November, this year it was October, students often take a practice SAT, a PSAT. These scores are just for their knowledge, your knowledge as a family, as well as the school counselor's knowledge. They never get sent to schools. This is just information for you all to have. 9th and 10th graders are automatically scheduled and registered to take the exam. In 11th grade, students do need to go to the main office. It's usually the second and third week of school that students will go to the main office, give a check for whatever the amount is, and then they will also sign up for the PSAT. The return of scores typically happens in December timeframe. Students will receive their scores. Last year they were provided their score through their seminar skills class, which is their sophomore or freshman, or not junior, but freshman or sophomore, and then individually for their 11th grade year. And then in addition to that, students have the opportunity to link their score results to Khan Academy, and they streamline different practice opportunities for the students. There's also a practice ACT. It's not called a PACT, it's just a practice ACT, and that's available in November. We have one that's actually taking place on Saturday. There was an email that was sent out to students and families. However, I believe the registration is closed at this point, but there is another opportunity that students could always take, a practice ACT. The greatest difference between the SAT and the ACT, because this is a frequent question that we get as school counselors, is that the ACT has more questions in a shorter period of time. I will also say that most colleges require some form of standardized testing. If you check out fairtest.org, that is an online resource for students and families. Perhaps standardized testing is not your student's forte, and that's okay. More and more colleges have gone on record to say that they will accept a student without any testing being shown. Fairtest.org actually has a website that's dedicated to every single school. You can search it to see which schools, and there are some phenomenal schools that are test optional. Sometimes through the college process, it means writing an extra supplement. It might be handing in a graded essay, but there are ways for students to not have to include their standardized test scores through the college process. In addition to that, there is a new SAT format. It's not as new anymore, but as of March 2016, it was a new format. It's the evidence-based reading and writing for the SAT as well as the math. There is an optional writing section. It's no longer required. Some colleges do require the writing section, not very many. If a student were to submit it, it would just kind of be something else that would be there. Some colleges won't look at it at all, some colleges will. But the evidence-based reading and writing as well as the math each have a maximum score of an 800. So we're back at 1600. If you have older students or are familiar from other family members, it used to be 2400, but we're back at 16. So 800 each. In the ACT formatting, there's a reading section, an English section, a math section, and a science section, as well as the optional writing again. The maximum score that you can have is a 36 as a composite score. So that is just something to keep in mind. The science section for students, it's still reading for the ACT. They might be more science-based questions, but it's still reading, and it's a lot, it's not a lot, but it is a pretty decent amount more of questions that the student will need to respond to. Sometimes it's 6 questions, sometimes it's more than 6, so if your student needs more time to read through an exam, your student might benefit more from the SAT than the ACT. It's also the types of questioning. Aside from that, the SAT has 2 math sections that uses a calculator and one that does not allow calculator use. In the ACT, you can always use a calculator, so that's a difference as well. The state of Connecticut currently has the SAT as their state exam. Students will need to earn a certain score in order to, or achieve different other assessments in order to graduate from Greenwich High School. As senior parents, you have either not heard anything which means that everything's great and good, or you received a letter home saying your student needs to do X, Y, or Z. However, the national test dates for the exam in the SAT are in typically March or April. Last year we had to have an April exam date because of the impending snowstorm that we had. But typically in the springtime you can expect your junior to be sitting for the SAT. There is no writing section that they will take with Greenwich High School. However, there are a number of opportunities for your students to complete their testing. And testing always is an individual thing. So you might sit there and ask your school counselor or be speaking to a friend of yours or another student family, and their testing might start earlier than your student's testing. And that is nothing that we are picking and choosing. A lot of it is also dependent on which math course your student is taking. There are certain math questions that if your student hasn't taken Algebra 2, they might not be as successful in completing that math section. So when it's a case-by-case basis, please don't think that we are favoring one student over another. It's just because we try to look through each student's process individually, and we personalize this process, which I think is something that speaks to us as counselors very well. So the national test dates for the SAT include August, October, November, December, March, May, and June. And then for the ACT, it's September, October, December, February, April, June, and July. That's a new addition that we had over this summer. So it used to be that they didn't have summer testing. Now they do have more summer testing. So there are truthfully plenty of opportunities for students. You might be sitting there and thinking, okay, there's lots of options. One thing is that a number of highly selective schools do require students to take SAT subject tests. Most of them require 2, one of them does require 3, but at the end of the day, work with your school counselors to start figuring out which SAT subject tests. Because your student is taking honors bio doesn't mean that they should be taking the biology subject test. A lot of times it's when a student is taking the advanced placement that they have all the information that they need. Most freshmen and sophomore students do not take subject tests. Usually it's beginning a student's junior or senior year that they will take subject tests. As I already said, most colleges only require 2. There are up to 20 different SAT subject tests that a student can take. So there's many options. There are foreign language options. There are different science options, different math options. There's a plethora of them. So definitely speak individually with your student's counselor to figure out if your student has to take subject tests, but also which subject test would be best for your student. Because one student is taking the Math 2 doesn't mean that another student should be taking it. So you might be sitting there and thinking, okay, so all of this about the testing, how do colleges use these scores? And they use it as one piece of the puzzle. I always like to say that the college process is like a 250-piece puzzle. Testing is one of those puzzle pieces. There's 250 other things like the application, like the letters of recommendation, like your students' activities list or college essays. So there's many different pieces to this. However, there is a couple of options when sending scores if you choose to send scores and the colleges either require them or if they don't require them. Score choice is when students have a choice by test date of which scores to send to colleges. Some colleges require that all test scores are sent. So that's something to specifically speak to your student's counselor about. There are definitely a number of schools that have gone on record to say we want to see everything. And when they say that, just send everything. There's also super scoring. So that's when a college takes the highest sub-score from multiple test dates to get a new higher super score. So if your student were to take the March SAT and score a 600 on the evidence-based reading and writing, but get a 650 on the math, and then they were to take the exam again in August and they scored a 620 on evidence-based reading and writing and a 630 on the math, they would take the highest evidence-based reading in August and the highest math from May, and that's how they would get their new highest score for your student, and that's what they would use for qualifying for admissions. Most students will take 2 exams in the fall of their junior year and in the spring of their junior year and 1 in the fall of their senior year. But again, like I said, there are test optional schools, so if your student takes it and it's just not working for them, we also have that option. Please know that it's less common for schools to super score the ACT than the SAT. They will look at the scores, but some schools do not create a new higher composite. Schools will be, if you were to ask them that question, an admissions representative, they will be honest and they will tell you whether or not they will create a new super score for your ACT composite score. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's a question to keep on your questions list when you are visiting different colleges or meeting with admissions personnel. There are a variety of test prep options. They range from private tutoring to group classes. There are a couple that are offered through continuing education. There are private companies that provide group classes. We also have a sheet of those different opportunities for test prep. So that's definitely something that you could reach out to your school counselor and they would be able to provide you that information. There is free test prep that is through Khan Academy, as I mentioned before, for both the PSAT and SAT, and we do try to support students in linking them when they take the PSAT as a 10th grader to Khan Academy as well. So the college timeline, while testing is a part of this, it's kind of a little bit separate. So as Mrs. Nash mentioned, 10th grade is really the year to start making those visits if you don't make a visit already during 9th grade, just because you are in Pennsylvania and you're driving through and you end up coming across a couple of schools in Allentown or Philadelphia. So begin visiting some local schools, so maybe your family doesn't have the ability to travel as frequently as others, or you're not necessarily in the United States when you're doing your traveling. You could even do some weekend visits just locally in the state of Connecticut. You can visit some local schools, perhaps a UConn Stores or even a UConn Stanford, which is right up the road, and other state schools such as a Western Connecticut State, Eastern Connecticut State, Southern Connecticut State, or Central Connecticut State. You also might want to visit a private institution, and the reason why I say that is because not only does the price differ between the public institutions and the private institutions, but also the size of the school can differ. So if your student says, I absolutely want big, I want a huge school, while UConn Stores isn't quite as large as Penn State in Happy Valley, they can at least get an idea for the size of campus, lectures that will be their classes of 250 students versus a private college that might have maybe 18 or a max of 50 students in a class. So that's just something to start to think about. Many students, I always recommend that they take pictures. I know that with iPhones, students are always taking pictures, but also creating a pros and cons list. The top things that they liked about a school and the top things that they didn't like about a school. When a student comes to us as school counselors, the pros and cons of what they like and what they didn't like are amazingly helpful to us, along with that question of why college. So this is just something to encourage your student to do, whether it's notes on their iPhone or handwritten pros and cons list. That's always helpful. And then when we're sitting down for the junior conference, we have more information to work with, because many students are like, I have no idea. In 11th grade, like I said before, students do take the PSAT. They do need to sign up for it. They will attend the college kickoff night in January of their junior year with their parents, and that's really when we start even further conversations, like Mrs. Nash mentioned. In addition to that, at that meeting, we will sit individually with you and your student. We will take an entire hour. It will be a full block. And we will go through a bunch of information. We will discuss testing, if your student has started their testing, or a plan for testing moving forward. We will discuss different schools. So that is really a great meeting, and that meeting needs to take place following attending the kickoff in January. We like to have them completed by May. There are rare occasions when they are a little bit further out, but that's definitely when that should be happening in 11th grade. And by the end of 11th grade, your students should have asked for an informal, at least 2 informal recommendations from teachers. Informal recommendations are something that get emailed to the teacher, to the school counselors only. They do not go to colleges. It's information that we incorporate within our letters of recommendation. You might sit there and say, why so early? Some school counselors do start writing their letters over the summer. Other school counselors want them before the first day of school. So it's important to check in with your student's school counselor regarding their specific requirements. The informal recommendation is typically 4 to 6 sentences about the student in the classroom. We as counselors will often take that information and incorporate it within our letters. So we do not send it to the schools, that comes straight to us, the informal. Then there's formal letters of recommendation. Your students should be asking their teachers before they leave, I always say before April break, but because some teachers have a maximum amount of students that they will write letters for, but definitely before they leave for summer break for their formal. Their formal letter of recommendation, students typically do not see. It gets sent through Naviance directly to a college. Students are responsible for informing their teachers of when their deadlines are, what their earliest deadline is. It's also at the end of the school year, they may not know it of their junior year, but when they return in September of their senior year, they should have their finalized list at that point. So that's a lot of information. In addition to that, we always recommend students over the summer of their junior year begin, if not finish, their college essay, which Ms. Preston is going to talk about some more. In addition to that, over the summer, typically no earlier than August 1st, students can log into the Common App. The Common App is one of the more widely used college applications. There's also the Coalition application, which many schools have also begun to subscribe to. They are different. They're different platforms. They ask very similar questions. What's unique about the Common App or the Coalition application is that you fill out your demographics information only once. You only include your activities once, and then you add different colleges that you're going to send this off to. So that's something else that they can work on. In addition to taking a look at their activities, the Common App only allows 10 spots for the activities section. So does that mean that every student fills all 10 slots? Not necessarily, but it's important that if your student is very involved, that they pick what their top 10 is, because that's what they have to choose. In addition to that, students should very well work to at least finalize their essay. Attending different college visits, finalizing their list, continuing testing if they need to. There are times when a student will come into my office and they scored a score that they are more than happy with, and they don't need to do any more testing. Their testing is done. But if your student needs to continue testing, it's critically important that they do so. Last but not least, there is the college workshop that we do. The college workshop takes place the last 2 weeks of the summer in August. It's when 2 English teachers and a school counselor work on the college essay, and then a number of counselors come back to work with students to go over the rest of the college application. So whether it be the Common App or the Coalition or both. So that's another opportunity, and Ms. Needell always sends out information regarding that in the spring of your student's junior year. In 12th grade, when students return to school, they should definitely follow up with their formal letter of recommendation writers. Inform them of what that first college deadline is. They should have a finalized list. They should also continue to challenge themselves appropriately academically. Senior year counts just as much as the other years. Colleges want to see that students are maintaining that rigor through their academics, but they're not over-challenging themselves. So it's a happy medium. It's kind of a seesaw balance that we need to find. In addition to that, finishing up essay, any supplements. My biggest caution is that they take longer than students think. That essay is a personal narrative, which is sometimes challenging for students. But lastly, always make sure that your student schedules other appointments with their school counselor. That one appointment that takes place in January, February, March, April, or May of their junior year is not the only time that we meet with students to go over their college process, their college list, their college essay. That's just one touch point. There should be at least a couple more. Also, make sure that you keep an eye on financial aid deadlines. Those often are parallel or at the same time to the actual college deadlines. So that's just something for you all to keep in mind as a family, especially if you're planning on applying for financial aid. Some schools do require something called the CSS profile. That one has a fee to it. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, doesn't. CSS profile does. There are specific schools that require the CSS profile, and that's even just to hand out scholarship information, let alone any grants or any other need-based aid. That is through the College Board website for the CSS profile. But that's really kind of where we are, and then in May, on May 1st, your student has to commit to a college and send in their deposit. So that's pretty much the big pieces to all of this.
Hi everyone. I'm going to be discussing activities and essay. The essay is my favorite part of the application. It's a time when students get to be reflective and creative. And with so many schools that are test optional now, this essay is really just a nice way for the college reader to paint a picture in their head of that applicant. But first I'll start with activities. Probably the most common question I will get from a ninth grader is, what do colleges want to see on their resume? That is, every ninth grader asks that question, and my response is always, well, what do you want to see on your resume? Because colleges really want to know what you value, what you have found important throughout your high school experience. Why would you want to attend a college that you'd have to follow their guideline of what they find important? What is important to you as the student? And a lot of ninth graders don't quite know yet, and that's where the resources that we have here come into play. We work with all of our ninth graders on finding something that they are excited about trying, or curious about trying, or maybe we're pushing them to go try different clubs and activities with a couple of friends. But it's really about finding something that they find important to them, whether it's working, whether it is a sport, whether it's babysitting, whether it is building something in collaboration with other students, whether it is service to the community. And that's where we sort of build that activity list, that resume. It's finding something that is important to them, okay? And then we offer 80 clubs and activities here. Does that mean that every student should be involved in 80 clubs and activities? No, nobody should be involved in 80 clubs and activities. That's crazy. Okay, it's about finding a few things that you find very meaningful to yourself and that you will continue and maybe take on a leadership role later on. Maybe you're devoting your high school career to serving the community in different organizations. That's wonderful. Or maybe you have to take care of siblings after school and pick them up from their schools and take them to their activities. Well, there's value in that too. There's value in a student that has to work every day after school to help support their family. So this is very individual. There isn't a formula that colleges are looking for. They are looking for students to to have meaningful activities for themselves. We get a lot of parent questions, well, how do I get my child involved in things? The first step, have them come and see us. We have a lot of different resources here. Our high school's website has a detailed list of every club and activity that we offer, when we offer it. I always ask my students, well, what do you value? And that's how we sort of come up with a list of things in town, here in school, that they can start participating in. We also have the club fair, like Christina had said. We have student activities office, which they are always, welcoming students and answering any questions that they have. If your son or daughter wants to start a club that we don't have here, well, they can do that too. If they have a group of students and a mentor that wants to help them, then that's great. They can do that here as well. And we've had a lot of students start a lot of wonderful clubs that have been going on for years and years and years here. Getting involved here in school, it helps kids do better. It helps you be connected to your teachers, to other peers. It just makes you happier to be here. The kids who are involved in our school are the ones that just are, they're happy to be here. They are the ones that really take advantage of every opportunity that we have. It's not always about filling up the 10 activities slots in the Common application. It's really about what those activities entail. Maybe it's 5 activities that you've done and you've been involved for 10 years in them or 4 years in them and you're the president or the founder of it. That's more important than filling up 10 slots of maybe doing 2 hours of service here, 4 hours of, a little club here. It's really finding something that you've committed your time to. And there's also a major value in internships and employment rather than maybe pre-college summer programs or big mission trips. It's maybe finding a passion for business and doing an internship each summer, or making sure that you're working each summer and saving money from your spending money in college. That has a lot of value to it. And from all of these activities and life experiences that you have comes the essay portion. So a lot of students will take all of the experiences that they've had or something that's part of their upbringing or very special club that they've started, and that's where that essay comes into play. Every school has really like a main essay portion, and that's your big essay. That's what we really want students to start working on first. This takes a lot of time. For the Common application, those essay topics become available in like February, March of the student's junior year. That tells you this takes a long time to kind of work through this process. This is not something that should be started senior year. And it's really important to sort of make sure that your children have time over the summer in between their junior and senior year to really work on this essay. It's very frightening and stressful for the kids to realize that they have 12 essays that they have to write in 3 weeks. And it's very stressful for us too, because we want to make it happen for them. And they really should have taken the time over the summer to start this. So just be mindful of the time that goes into that writing process. There's a lot of resources available here at the high school to help students brainstorm ideas. We love to meet with students, the end of junior year to really send them off into the summer with a nice idea, an outline, for that main Common App essay. We have Allison here in the College Career Center. She'll do the essay workshops in the spring and again in the fall. We have a lot of different strategies that we use to help kids come up with great ideas for their essay. Our English teachers are amazing throughout the writing process. They help us, the grammatical stuff for the kids. So we always encourage the students to go see their English teachers, and they never turn a kid away, so that's really helpful. The They just have to avail themselves to the help. I always send reminder emails to all of my juniors right before we leave for break. Have I seen you about your Common App essay or your main essay? I'd like to see you. Let's come up with an idea. So it's really important that they start thinking about this at the end of junior year so they can work on that over the summer. What the essay should not be. The essay should not be just a laundry list of activities. Okay, this is not just like a glorified resume. Okay, it shouldn't be about just your academics or about the bio class that maybe you didn't do as well in ninth grade. This should be highlighting something about you. It helps the reader get to know you. You don't really want them to know about the B- or the C that you got in, ninth grade bio. They're going to see it on your transcript. You want to talk about the amazing things that you've done or something important to you about who you are. You can use people as inspiration as part of this essay, but a lot of times students will turn this into an essay about somebody else. So it has to be about you. The colleges want to know about you. When kids can pull off, this person inspired me and this is what I've learned, this is how it shaped me, that's a beautiful essay, but you have to be very careful that it's not about somebody else. What sometimes makes a good English paper doesn't always make a good college essay. A traditional 4-paragraph essay that an English teacher loves to see may not be something that a college wants to see. You can have some, creative liberty here. You've had kids who have, created beautiful poems or unique timelines of what their typical day looks like, or they've written about the peanut butter and jelly sandwich that they have had for lunch every single day since ninth grade, or about the little black dress that accompanied, a girl to every important event in her life thus far. So you have that, you can use those creative juices for this essay. It's not always about that traditional essay format. A lot of high school kids have not had life-changing events so far. Sometimes it's about that one day on a mission trip that they met a little boy that changed their life. It's not necessarily about this whole mission trip that they've taken. So sometimes it's a smaller topic. And again, we can help students work their way through to make that a meaningful essay for themselves. The good news is an average essay won't necessarily hurt a student. Okay, everything sort of helps. An essay with grammatical errors, missing the mark, that could hurt, but an average essay, it's not going to hurt a student. Again, this is another way for the college admissions reader to get to know the student. And if it's an average essay, it's an average essay, okay? And this is one component, like Christina was sort of saying before, this is one component of the application process. It's not the component. There's a lot of puzzle pieces that go into play here, and this is something that can, most of the time, really help the student. Some of the best essays are written in 15 minutes rather than laboring over for months and months and sort of having that writer's block. A lot of my seniors came in and said, Mrs. Presta, I wrote this in 10 minutes at the dining room table last night. It's probably terrible. And it's the best essay they've written. Sometimes it just flows, and there you are. It's a beautiful essay. So that's the main Common App essay, but a lot of colleges will also ask for supplemental essays, and these essays are only seen by that particular school. And the famous why this school essay is part of that. A lot of schools will use that as their supplemental essay. This is important. It's not only about, oh, it's a beautiful campus, I love Boston, I love the city. You have to dig deeper with these types of essays, and I always have students hop onto YouTube and watch different lectures with professors or find specific organizations that are related to a subject area that they want to study, or if service is something very important to them. Well, this economics program at Tulane, you have to do this service project. So I have them dig deeper. That's really what these why essays are looking for. They want to know that the student really has the same value, again, that word, as the student does. And if the student is having trouble writing the 4 different supplemental essays for, let's say, BC, and they're not understanding like what that school wants, then maybe that's not the right fit for them. You don't have to fit into their mold. It's a mutual decision about whether it's a good fit. You know, where you want to be a good fit for them, they should be a good fit for you too. So if those essays are not coming together, or it's not something that you feel you can talk about, then maybe reconsider. And that's something we can go over with the students. The biggest piece of advice that I would say is have the students ask for help. This is really very important. This is not something that they have to go through alone. This is a long process with the writing portion of this application. So please have them utilize our services. This is why we're here. We love doing it. We've been reading essays all fall long, and we like doing it, and we want them to produce the very best piece of work that they could. It has to be their voice, though. You know, it's very obvious when they come in and it's mom or dad's voice and it's not a 17-year-old's voice. Okay, the college readers are waiting for a 17-year-old to write an essay, not a 40-year-old to write an essay. It's really just very important that while we provide guidance and help and advice to them, it still has to be their voice. Any questions so far? Yeah, okay, I'm sort of speeding through because I know that we have to end at 11.
Yeah, I got a question. I'm trying to put all this in perspective. You guys, this has been great, the things you talked about. And you talked about coming in to meet with you, but I don't know how you guys fit together with so my son was apparently assigned a counselor, and he's met with him a couple times. But does he make a request to talk to one of you people, or does he only talk to his counselor?
So every student here is assigned a school counselor, and they were assigned when they entered the high school as a 9th grader or whenever they transferred here, and that's who they would see for their college process. But every student has access to Allison as the college career counselor as well. So your son would go to his counselor. And you'll have your junior conference with your counselor, and he'll sort of lead the way with you, but then you always have Allison as a resource. And so the students on my caseload will have access to me and all the other
Because
counselors.
when I hear you guys talking, you're like, come in and see it. So I'm like, all right, this sounds great. I'll tell my son.
Well, every counselor feels the same way.
But apparently I can't have him come talk to you.
Well, your counselor would say the same thing.
Thank you.
We can open it up, I think we might have went over, but happy to still answer some questions that some of you may have.
I just had one question when I heard you talking about the recommendations from teachers. You talked about the 2 informal and 2 formal. Is that generally from the same teachers or no? So it's 4 separate?
Yeah, so just the questions everybody can hear is about recommendations. So there are 2 formal recommendations that go directly to the colleges. And then the informal recommendations are from different people that just come to the counselor to help us write our letter of recommendation.
But
So
you're
for different
looking for
people.
4 different ones?
Correct, correct. And we guide you through this. In the junior college conference, we really help you to determine who you're going to ask. We have lots of to-do lists and checklists. So I know that is a lot of information about the recommendations, but not to worry, all that really gets outlined in the junior conference.
When is that conference?
So the junior college conference, first of all, the kickoff night meetings are in January. And then anytime after that kickoff meeting for juniors, then you can call your house to schedule the conference. But typically they're somewhere between late January to March.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation. In terms of the college visits, I know that you mentioned show up and be on a vacation or on a weekend. But do colleges normally have specific visiting times and hours and seasons that we need to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how do you go about scheduling tours when you go out and visit college campuses? So you can really do all that online now. So let's just say you want to go visit Fairfield U. go to the Fairfield U website, and he'll show you a whole calendar of when their tours are and information sessions are, and then you just sign up for times when you're there, you know, with whatever is your schedule. If you can, I mean, it's sometimes nice to get out a little early and just browse around campuses, but if you can, especially starting sophomore year, really make appointments for those tours and information sessions, because that's really gonna help you really learn about the school versus like driving around and walking around. Yes.
It's obviously quite an international community here. Is there any difference in the process whether you're a citizen or just a permanent resident?
So the question is about applying as an international student. So you're talking about applying to international schools, or if you're an international student, you're
You're
applying
an
here?
international student here.
Yeah, and the process is basically the same. So same essays, same visiting process, same development of lists. Depending on how many years you've been here, you may apply as an international student, but it really doesn't change the actual process.
So if you want to apply out of the country to international schools?
Yeah, so that process, if you're looking to apply to schools, which is becoming much more common than it had been in, you know, years ago, that process is very different. It's different application, different requirements. So yes, that process is definitely different. Questions? I just wanted to close with a couple pieces of advice of what you can do as parents in the room. Be a guide and facilitator in this process. Connect your child to the purpose of college and big picture thinking. Encourage your child to be reflective and authentic in this process. But most importantly, have fun with this process. It's a lot of information, but it's going to be fun. I always remember going to college first with my parents. So we welcome you. Pick up the phone, call us. We're here to help you. It's so important that we work together as a team. And let's try to make this the most exciting possible time in life.